All right. Okay, so I'm going to do talk about spoke orders. I want to give my disclaimer that I am not an expert on this. This is just my story on how I got spokes for a bike that I'm working on. If we need to talk to an expert about wheel building, we have one in the room. It's at least someone who's built a lot of wheels. So as I'm talking about this stuff, Jim, if I am saying the wrong terms or if I'm saying something that is misleading or is not right, I want you just to speak up, okay?
You've researched this well enough that you will do just fine.
Well, we'll find out. I want you to fact check me on this one.
Live on the spot.
Yes.
What we can do is you can talk and we'll watch Jim's head.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay. So also my other disclaimer is that a lot of the talks I've done here, they've all been about working on a 1928 Harley Davidson. It's not that I just want to only talk about that stuff. It's just that that's what I'm working on. And I think a lot of this information just isn't just about 1928 Harley Davidsons. This is about how to order spokes for a wheel. So the information that I have on these handouts may not necessarily be specifically for your bike, but what this, I guess the takeaway will be is when you are on the phone with Buchanan's, who's the supplier for the spokes these days, and is it true that they're pretty much the only game in town, Jim?
To my knowledge, they're the only manufacturer in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, so there you go. We are stuck with, I shouldn't say stuck, because they were extremely helpful and nice to me and returned calls extremely promptly. I asked dumb questions. They gave me smart answers. Like, it was great. So they are a good place to deal with, but you do have to go in with a little bit of knowledge before you just order things, okay? So I'm going to hand out a couple handouts here. This is exactly like school now. So the first handout is going to be a couple. I've got two different spoke orders on this handout. One is going to be for the Harley Davidson, and then another is going to, and that has that's going to be for something where I had a spoke sample that I could actually send to California and they could duplicate. And then the last 2 or 3 pages is a spoke order for a wheel that actually Jim did build for a guy by the name of Jim Vandergriff maybe 15 years ago. It was an Indian, it was a mid-20s Indian spool hub, and it was a 21-inch steel wheel. So we wanted to use that particular hub and that particular rim, but we didn't know spoke size. So that is what that handout section will talk about. If you have no spoke sample, but you want to get spokes into a particular wheel or rim, okay? The other handout, I guess I should have got this one going. The other handout, if you want to follow along with it or not, part of my story is going to be if you have pre-existing spokes and you're trying to get the right thing in the right wheel, and you have a parts book for the type of bike you're working for, you always consult the parts book. I mean, this usually is going to give you at least a clue as to what you might need. However, there is some trickiness that goes on when you are reading 100-year-old publications for ordering parts. So there will be something that I will address. And the reason why I put the parts book pages there is so I can kind of explain the problem that I had. Okay, so first off, I did bring a couple wheels. Here's the problem. I am building a 28 Harley, as I said. Now, it's a regular JD. Those would have come with a 20-inch wheel. Now, in 28, and maybe even pre-28, but I know 28 for sure, they started making something called the JDH, which then was able to be purchased with an 18-inch wheel. So this is what my bike came with. It came with 18-inch wheels, and I want to put 20-inch wheels on it. Okay, yes. So, and the other thing about a 28 is it's the first year for a front brake. So this is the front brake drum, okay? So the thing that's nice about having a 20, in my opinion, is it fills the wheels up a little, or fills the fenders up a little bit more. You can't, especially the back fender, you can't see any airspace between the fender and the wheel. It just looks better, in my opinion. But the other thing is that I am making this bike for judging. And if I have a set of 18-inch wheels on a standard 28 JD, I will get a point deduction, because mine would have to be a JDH or a JDL in order to have an 18-inch wheel set. So that's why I care about trying to switch to a 20-inch wheel. So here's the problem. I have this, but I don't have a full 20-inch wheel. So this is when teamwork comes in. Chris Treat, one of our members who's not here today, he was building a 28 JD. And it just so happens that he had a full 20-inch set that was complete. So the best case scenario is if you can actually take spokes out of an original wheel and send them to California. Okay? So here's how we did this. We were able to pull the spokes out of the wheels. I'll hand these around, okay? So this is what you send. This is how I did it anyway. So, and it's denoted on the list there. It tells me what I need, right? So this is, what is this one? This is a front wheel opposite. Front wheel opposite brake. And then this is the front wheel with the brake side. So here's the story. If you look in the parts book, here's the issue with the parts book. Notice how it says front wheel group. So you go through that parts book, and it has all the spokes for the front and the rear wheel in the front wheel section. And it does not denote the part number for the rear spoke or the front spokes. It only gives you sizes. So there's a bit of trickiness going on there, okay? The other thing that it doesn't denote is it doesn't tell you if you should have an inside or an outside spoke. So just so happens that once I pulled spokes from a wheel on this conical hub, I did not have to have an inner or an outer spoke difference. And so then I have a difference. Now, let me hand some of these around just so you can see the stuff. I'll get these, I'll just start handing these around and you can kind of look at them. So here's why there might need to be an inner or an outer spoke difference. The guy at Buchanan's, Thomas was his name. That's why it says attention Thomas on the spoke order. He said, does the inner or outer spokes, and what I mean by inner or outer spoke is inner is the one that's traveling from, that's going from the inside of the hub out, and the outer spoke is the one that's on the outside. Okay? So he says, are there different inner and outer spokes? And on the front hub, no. And the reason why is if you look down this hub, this part of the hub flange is actually bent in towards the center of the wheel, allowing the spoke bend angle to be the same on all the spokes, right? And now if you look at the inside of this, this is a kind of a particular type of hub flange. This also makes it so it can use exactly the same spoke. So we're good here. There wasn't an inner or outer spoke.
So you only have two different spokes on that wheel.
Only two different spokes on this wheel. Exactly. Okay? Easy. Now let's get to the rear wheel. So, parts book. Here's the trickiness of the parts book. I figured this out. That's easy. It's the same spoke on either. It's the same spoke for, well, same spoke on inner and outer for the left, and same spoke on inner and outer for the left, right. So now we get to the rear wheel. And he says, usually the inner spoke has a different bend than the outside spoke because it helps direct the spoke towards the center of the wheel. And if you look in the parts book, it doesn't tell us inner or outer spoke. Well, Chris and I decided to pull spokes, but if you pull a spoke on one of these wheels, it's really easy to get an outer spoke off because you just take this nipple out and then you lay your spoke out and you can run your spoke through the hub flange.
Show us how easy it is to take out an inner.
Exactly. You've got to get about 6 outers in order to get an inner out. So that's why we opted to not do the inner, because we said, well, the parts book doesn't tell us we need a different spoke for the inner. Well, Thomas at Buchanan's on the phone said, usually there's a difference. So I go back to the shop, I do all the work to get one out. Lo and behold, Thomas was right. Here are the differences. I'm going to hand this around, okay? So this is the inside spoke angle bend, and this is the outside spoke angle bend. So basically what happens is the inside is a relaxed angle. It's not quite 90, and the outside is more of a 90. So what that does, if it's in the wheel, it does that, right? It makes it so one can go in further and, can like do that. So I would have definitely got the wrong spokes if I just sent those rear spokes and said, I need 40 of these. These are 40 spoked wheels. I would have got the wrong spoke if it wasn't for listening to the guy and saying, oh, this clues me into having to go back to the shop and remove a spoke from a wheel and figure it out. Okay? Next thing we have to start with is that we want to get, because I'm trying to make a judging bike out of this, I want to get the correct finish. Buchanan's, they sell chrome spokes, they sell, I think, some nickel-plated spokes, stainless steel spokes, and they sell bare steel spokes. The spokes that you are handling as they're being passed around, those are all bare steel because they are going to be nickel-plated. In 1928, Harley nickel-plated all the spokes and nipples. They didn't offer that particular spoke in nickel-plated, so I'm going to have to plate all mine myself. Yes?
I see something interesting. On the 40-spoke wheel, you're ordering 42 spokes. Don't you trust yourself?
I wanted to have, that's a great question. Why did I order extra? Why did I order extra? Well, I might not trust myself. I might actually lose one. Or I might do a talk at a meeting and someone might take one home. Or it might just be that I want to have samples. There are other people out in the world who might be working on late 20s JDs and they would love to have a sample. So that's why I ordered extras. If I'm ordering extras and it takes some time and some effort to get them, I am going to make sure that I order extra. The other thing you're going to notice is that the spoke nipples, which are basically the part that screws onto the end of the threaded part of the spoke. In the 20s, they were 2 flat spoke nipples. They only had 2 flats on them as opposed to 4 flats. So now for someone who's trying to build a wheel, a 4 flat is a way better scenario, right, Jim?
Unless that's not original.
Unless it's not original. If I'm trying to make a more functional, easier to build wheel, I'm probably going to want a 4 flat nipple. However, if I don't want a point deduction when it comes to judging, I need 2 flats. The reason why the 2 flats sucks is because you got a spoke wrench that will go around so far.
Not quite 180.
And then you have to get it back on the flats in order to keep turning it. If you had 4 flats, you have a lot more combination to tighten up the spoke nipple. Is that a correct assessment of the situation?
That's why you have an angled head on your spoke wrench, because it will either nipple on the spoke this way or this way?
We'll see, in mine, I just have one of those little flat fork-looking spoke wrenches.
Try some proper fitting spoke.
Okay, well, there's some very good advice for you.
Canon also sells those.
Okay, all right.
They are not cheap, and they come in thousands.
Okay. So I will also say, so now they said, all right, we can match your, and I want to say that Buchanan's, they are not making reproduction spokes. They're making replacement spokes. They never lay any claims to these spokes being exactly like they were in 1928. So what they are going to get right is the length of the spoke, which is the most important part here. The other thing that they're going to try to get good for you is they're going to try to get the diameter correct, right? Like the end, the middle diameter, and they're also going to try to get the bend correct. Okay, so that's what this says here. Yeah, and the nipples, right? So, and if you notice the difference between the old nipples and the new nipples, very close, right? I will say that the bent end of the spoke has a little bit larger diameter than the original spoke. That's just how it's going to have to be. Okay. The other thing I will also say is that Buchanan's has a B stamped on the end of their spokes. Now, if your last name is Binger, maybe that's great. But if you are trying to make a judging bike, they will actually give you a 1/4 point deduction for that stupid B. So what you need to do, you grind the B off. I'm going to hand this one around. This is a 1927 Indian spoke that I did for my Scout. And all 80 spokes, I ground the B off. Originally, the Harley Davidsons, some of them had nothing on the end, and a lot of them had T. The T stood for Torrington. It was a spoke company in Torrington, Connecticut, that made large amounts of spokes for the bicycle and the motorcycle industry. Unfortunately, Buchanan's will not make you a spoke that says T on the end, because they are Buchanan's, not Torrington, right? Okay, so the next thing that we want to try to nail down is the right size of the spoke. And we have to talk about the style of spoke. So basically, the rear wheel is called a single-butted spoke. So basically that means that the end, the bent end that goes through the hub, is larger diameter than the shaft that goes all the way out. So if you do look in the parts book, it tells you it's 175 thousandths spoke, right? And then if you look for the front wheel, it tells you it's a 48 thousandths spoke, okay? So here's the good thing. 175 thousandths down to 148 thousandths. And then on the front, it's 48 thousandths down to 125 thousandths. And then the end does what on the front? It gets bigger again. That's called double-butted or center reduced. That's another name that Buchanan uses for it. Okay, so notice what happens on the front and the rear wheel. The nipples are the same nipple because the ends are both on a spoke that's 175 thousandths, or 148 thousandths. Okay, so that's how Harley got by with using one spoke nipple, but different spoke sizes. Okay, so this is something you need to know about the order. All of your spoke nipples will be the same, so 80 exactly the same. Okay, so the next thing is how do these sizes that Harley put in their parts book equate to modern spoke sizes? And they don't use Harley says 175 thousandths spoke, but Buchanan's doesn't really work that way. They use gauge sizes. So I talked to Thomas on the phone. I said, "What's the equivalent size to this inch measurement?" And so what he tells me is, I've got it written down here. A 7-gauge spoke is 180 thousandths of an inch. A 9-gauge spoke is 142 thousandths of an inch, and a 10-gauge spoke is 125 thousandths. So, what I've just said here is I am within 5/1000ths of an inch of all the dimensions that I said here. So I can get a very, very close spoke to match what I've got here. Okay? So now that we have the spoke sizes figured out from what I want into modern gauge equivalencies, now it can write on my order. So notice how my order is written here. I lay it out and I say I am building 3 of these wheels. I need 2 stainless steel sets and I need 1 bare steel set. So you have to be very clear and concise about what you want, okay? So then the next thing is I put the rear wheel information. And notice how I say it. I say the length is the same for the inside and the outside spokes, but included is a sample for the inside spoke angle bend. Okay, so I had to send a sample for the outside spoke and the inside spoke so I get the bends correct. The next thing on the order was these are single butted spokes with bent end at 7 gauge reduced to 9 gauge. How they refer to it is a 7/9. That's how he kept talking to it with me. Okay, so then I write down my quantities and the types of nipple flat that I want. And then the front, notice that it says on the brake side is center reduced 9-10-9. So that's how Buchanan's refers to a center reduced or a double butted spoke. They will use the actual numbers on the spokes. So these are 9-10-9s, or at least the sample. Not the sample, the reproduction that they made, the replacement that they made is a 9-10-9. Okay?
So the gauge is like electrical wire, that larger number is smaller.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So the other thing I want to denote here is that because I have spokes already, this makes it a pretty easy thing. Now let's go to something where we may not have spokes, which is page,
Yeah, there's one more thing that the judging will get you on.
yeah,
The flats on the nipples on the Buchanan spokes are longer than the Harley Davidson flats, and they will deduct points for that.
yep. Yes, the minutia gets deep. So, okay, this next section is for figuring out spokes where we don't have a spoke sample. So I've got the whole list here. The rim that I wanted to use was actually sold by Buchanan's, and I had a part number. So I said I want to use this. I want to use this rim, and I put their part number. So they have the dimensions for their rim. So I didn't have to come up with rim dimensions. However, I did have to come up with dimensions for the hub. So this is how I did it. This was a few years ago, so I just took a photo of this and I photocopied it, and I just went on there with the Sharpie and I drew the dimensions of what there was on there. So there's a lot of stuff they needed to know. Okay? So the first thing he needs to know is something called the spoke circle, which is basically from the, well, let's just look at a hub. From opposite holes, center to center. That's called the spoke circle. So they needed the spoke circle dimension on both sides of the hub. This is a spool hub. It has the same spoke flange on both sides. So the same spoke circle on both sides. The next thing they needed to know was the hub flange width. So down here, notice it's 220,000ths of an inch. They need to know that to make sure that that spoke bend is long enough so it doesn't bind or be too loose in there. Okay. The next thing they need to know is hub center. So that's basically from the center of the flange to the center of the flange. Okay, so that's on there. The next thing they needed to know is 40 holes. That's how many holes, right? And so that
Very important.
Very important, right? 40 holes. And they also needed to know hub hole diameter, right? So it's 156 thousandths of an inch diameter of the hole was, okay? It says also inner and outer flanges are the same, holes are the same, okay? So that was enough to get us the correct spokes built for this hub. The next one that is the rear. Same thing. Okay, same dimensions, but it was just, a different hub. Okay? So then here's the other thing that's said on there. There is no offset on these wheels. That is something that they really need to know about. And so these don't have offsets. What that means is the spoke length could be, on this front wheel, it's exactly the same spoke on each side, the same length spoke on each side, right? Because basically the center of the hub is in the center of the wheel.
They have a common center line.
Right, common center line. Now, I don't have a motorcycle wheel that has an offset, but I recently built a bicycle wheel that does have an offset. So I can show you guys this and get a good visual on what an offset is. Good way that you can see an offset is if you hold the wheel up to you and you look straight down it, the spokes opposite the gear cluster, they have a steeper angle this way, whereas this side, they're more straight up and down. And the reason why is because we're making room for this gear cluster. So what we're doing is we're pushing the center line of our hub this direction. So that means that these spokes are going to be shorter than these spokes. And so Buchanan needs to know that. They need to know how big is the offset. And let's say the offset is very small. As Jim has just said, maybe it would be the same spoke. It would just be a matter of you truing it correct. Is that?
It might be one turn spokes on one side in a turn, and on the other side out a turn, which shifted the rim across 7, 8, 10 thousandths.
Okay. So, and this is where you might need to consult with the wheel builder, right? Like, do we need a different size spoke? I mean, let's say the offset is only 1/2 of an inch. I mean, can we get a 1/2 inch offset by using the same spoke length? Probably not, right? So good thing that we asked the wheel builder, right? So, and this is why Buchanan's needs to know this stuff. Now I know that this is a bicycle wheel, but just to give you an example on different size, this side is 276 millimeter and the inside is 274 millimeter. It's only 2 millimeters difference, but it makes a huge difference when you build the wheel. Okay, so that's information in these in there. All the dimensions of the hub, offset, and they have the dimensions of the rim. Now, if I was trying to build these wheels and I had no spokes, I would have to do the same thing that I did on the photocopies. Measure my hubs, give them the offset, and then I would have to measure the rim. That's a whole other story. I haven't measured the rim. I didn't do that, so I can't talk about that. Do you have anything to say about measuring rims?
Actually, the rim doesn't into it near as much as knowing what the offset is, and then once that is established, they should be able to tell you that it's probably going to be 6 or 8 thread turns more on one side than another.
I see.
It's pretty close, but they're not the same.
I see. Okay. So the other thing I do want to kind of talk about, and I don't know, this is kind of an esoteric point, but these wheels are what's referred to as a clincher style rim. And if there's not a lot of things made out in the world, except some modern bicycles have some clinchers on them now. But pretty much cars and motorcycles all have a drop center rim. So, and really, if you don't know the difference between them, is that if you looked at a cross section of a clincher rim, they basically look like a flattened U, and then the ends of the U are kind of turned over, right? It's kind of like a staple. That's kind of what it looks like, almost like a flattened staple, right? So what happens is that there's a hook on the rim. And so then how the tire works is the tire actually has a little hook that goes into that hook. And really, these tires are on these rims with a wing and a prayer. You have to have air pressure in these wheels to force that hook of the tire to be in the hook of the rim. If you run low tire pressure, it's very possible that this tire is going to come off in the fork or in the rear frame of your bike, of your motorcycle.
One of the guys in Wichita built a Henderson on the maiden voyage. He didn't put enough air in it, and he's going down the road like 30 miles an hour. Well, once that comes out, the inner tube shoots out and locks the front wheel up. He threw the thing down the road.
Yeah, you can die. You can die very quickly. So they're dangerous. Why do I want this? If they're dangerous and they're awful, which they pretty much are, why do we want this? Because I am trying to make a bike for judging. And if I have the incorrect hub, or if I have the incorrect rim, I also get a point deduction. Most bikes that are ridden a lot out on the road, especially of this age, they've been converted to a drop center rim. The end of the 20s kind of spelled the end for clincher rims for motorcycles. I think, 1927 was the end for Excelsior Henderson using these. That was their last year. Indian stopped using it on everything except a Junior Scout in 1929. Up until 1937, a clincher was still on a Junior Scout, which Chris Treat actually has. His bike has clinchers on it, a 37 Junior Scout. And Harley, I believe, stopped using them in 30. So I think a 30 VL and newer is all drop center. Yes.
Was the shift in recognition of safety needs, or was it in response to additional power and speed ability?
I think probably both. Wouldn't people say this stuff?
I would be more inclined to believe it was a safety issue more than anything.
Because they had power and speed already in the 30s.
Yeah, there were bikes that could go 80 miles an hour like straight out of the box. So So, Excelsior Henderson were the first to do this. They were the ones making some of the more powerful bikes. They were making 4-cylinder bikes. So I don't know if that had anything to do with their choice, but yeah.
Is your bicycle wheel a drop center?
Yes. Yeah, this one is a drop center. Yeah. And so, here's the other, just cautionary tales about spoke orders. Okay. Just a quick story. So there was a guy down in Texas by the name of John Newman. He has since passed, but he was really big on the Cannonball Run thing, and he would take JD hubs and build them into drop center rims so he could do a cross country trip in a safe manner. Totally smart. Someone who was building a same year JD that John Newman was called Buchanan's and said, "I'm building this wheel. Do you have spokes for it?" And they say, "Oh yeah, we just made spokes for John Newman's." And so they ordered these spokes. They were for a drop center rim, not a clincher rim. And the spokes didn't fit, right? So really, we're not in the show me state right now, but we're close to the show me state. And I like that idea. You got to show me, right? Just because you said it's the right spoke for this wheel, I want to make sure it's the right spoke for the wheel. And this is why doing these spoke orders and going to all the effort is worth every bit of effort. And I will say this is a huge team effort. This wasn't just about me. This was about Chris Treat needing spokes and us working together to get spokes out. It was about working with Buchanan's, asking the right questions. It really is like a team effort to do these things. So I just want to acknowledge that, you can restore a bike by yourself, but if you're not asking questions and having club members help you out, then you're going to have a harder road ahead of you, is in my opinion. Any questions about this stuff?
Are clinchers tubeless?
No. Nope.
No.
No.
Closes are tubeless.
Okay, what's a tubeless rim like?
So here's the other disclaimer. I only work on 1920s motorcycles primarily, so I'm going to have to say I don't know what that looks like. Someone else is going to know. I don't know.
Are you talking about a wire wheel that's tubeless? Okay. With the tire of it off and the tube, of course, out, and you're looking at the butt end, the opposite end of the nipples themselves, the groove in the rim itself, that will be flooded with silicone, side to side.
So the spokes can't.
You've got to have a way to keep air from leaking past the spoke nipples, because there's 41 holes in that rim. So you fill it with silicone, and then you clean out where the tubeless valve stem goes, lock that into place, and put your tire on, put the air filter.
Does that really work? I mean, I can't.
You find a few of those things that are custom available from different suppliers. I just had one show up on my doorstep yesterday from Worth Harley Davidson up north. It was a 48 spoke tubeless rear. I couldn't touch it because I don't have a way to take the silicone out. I don't have a way to put the silicone back, and it uses a very odd rim pattern. It was a totally custom spoke. It was nothing what you would normally run into. So I just turned them away and I said, I'm sorry, it's got to go back to their factory.
One more thing I do want to bring up, I kind of left out about doing a spoke order, is that if you notice on the second spoke order on that handout, I basically said I will use the lacing pattern that you suggest. And what lacing pattern means is basically how many crosses the spokes go over themselves, right? So let's count this one out. I'll show you what this means. And again, Jim, if I'm saying this wrong, say, hey, no, that's not right. Okay, so basically, if you can count the spoke, how many times it crosses another spoke. So let's start with this one. 1, 2, 3.
So that's an inside-outside pattern across 3.
Okay, that's the right nomenclature. That's what you would need to say.
So the spokes on that side of the rim flange, half of them come from the outside of the flange, half of them come from the inside, and each spoke crosses 3 other spokes.
Okay, so then when I made the spoke order, I said I will use the lacing pattern you suggest. So I don't remember what they said because this has been 15 years ago. They must have said that because I did take the spokes to Jim and he made the wheel and it worked. So must have been, I imagine it was a 3 cross inside outside. So that's something to think about. The other thing to also think about was, let's say you are searching for parts. Let's say you are searching for the correct rim for the right hub, those sorts of things. I have a really good example of something that is extremely hard to spot if you're not looking close, but if you try to build a wheel, you will very quickly see you have the wrong part. So notice that this hub flange, conical hub, right? This conical hub has a larger hub flange on one side than the other side. So what that does is notice that when the spokes enter the rim, they are at a different angle on this side than they are on this side. Notice That angle, right? If you looked at this, right? If you go to the other side, it's more like this.
Also known as a conical rim.
Okay, so then the question is, which one of these is a conical rim? And you're at a swap meet. And there's 30 of these things, because that's a lot of times how these things end up at swap meets. A guy brings 30 of these out of his barn, like Dan Holman did. These came from Dan Holman. So here they are. What are they? How do we see this? Luckily, Dan Holman had this rim, because I needed a 20-inch conical JD rim. He had it. And this is what it was.
How much did he charge you for?
No comment. So,
Dan's here somewhere.
So here's how you notice it. And actually, this is about a year and a half ago, I brought these rims. And Jim Lapisto helped me figure this out. So if you look at the nipple well, and the nipple well is the actual little well here that the nipple fits in. On the conical side, this nipple well is going to be more extreme. So if you look at it, on one side, there is more metal that is bulged out on the non-brake side. And on the brake side, it goes almost all the way down to the rim. So you can actually see that the angle is more extreme on that particular side of the rim. Yeah, Jim.
An easier way to see it is to put a nipple on a spoke, a couple of them, and put that spoke in the hole and press it in with your thumb.
Seat it all the way.
It will seek its own angle, and a narrow angle will be for the small side of the hub, and an extreme angle will be for the large side of the hub.
So if you're out searching for a conical hub at the swap meet, maybe you need to take a couple spokes with you.
Have a couple of spokes with nipples on them in your pocket.
Interesting.
I wonder if you could just use like a nail.
Well, the nice thing about the spoke nipple is that they've got a countersink on them. So I mean, I think the countersink would probably seat more, yeah, it probably would seat better into that recess.
It will find its own angle.
What else? I don't know if I left anything out. I will say that I have not built my wheels yet, but Chris built a set of wheels with the spoke order that you guys have. They were perfect. They're damn near perfect. When he laced them up, the spoke nipple just barely under the last thread. There was a couple of them that stuck out just very slightly.
Dress them off with a side grinder.
Right. So what I guess I'm saying is I think that our due diligence on figuring out spoke size and talking to Thomas at Buchanan's paid off, because when he built the wheels, it really showed that they were the right length. It really showed that that we didn't have any problems in building a wheel.
Those guys really know their onions. They really
Yeah.
do.
So, what else? Is that it? Any other questions? I mean, yeah.
How important is it to torque your spokes?
I don't know that. I mean, must be, right?
There are some torque wrenches that are made for spoke. I've never seen the occasion to use one. My best method is to, if you have one, just to get a plastic handle screwdriver, and if you think they're tight enough, just bang on the spokes with your back of your screwdriver and listen for the music. It's like tuning a piano string, and you want them fairly tight. Of course, you don't want them to break. And over a period of so much time, I can tell pretty much. When you first assemble, you want a little oil on the threads. You're not trying to run an engine, but you're trying to cut in. You don't want them to have friction. You want to read torque. So a little bit of oil on the threads. If they're stainless, you've got to use Hi-Port, which is special stuff like you put in the rear end of a car. It has a lot of sulfur and phosphorus in it, so it gives it a lot of lubricity. If you use regular lubrication on stainless steel spokes, they will spot well. And you'll be busting spokes before you get the job even started.
So Buchanan's, when you do make this order, I should have brought it. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. When you make the order, every set of spokes, they send you the correct lube to put on the spoke. So they send you a little tiny bottle of the right stuff. So if you order stainless spokes, they're giving you the right lubrication to put on a stainless steel spoke.
And if you squeeze that bottle and smell it, it smells real phosphorus and funky, kind of like a burnt match or firecrackers. Because it's phosphorus, it's sulfur.
Yeah. So yeah, that is important. Yeah. So I've built a lot of bicycle wheels, not a lot of motorcycle wheels, and I'm just like getting into this. But I really just wanted to give the talk about how I got the right size spoke for my application. Yeah.
When you're licensing, is there a sequence in order you're supposed to tighten them up?
I'm sure
No. Just try to bring them all in together at the same time.
How do you do that?
Well, all right, let me explain. When you first start to assemble it, you lay your spokes out direction. The rim determines the lace pattern. The rim determines the lace pattern. Okay, what anybody tells you, that's it. You can write that. God said that. Once you've got that started, just put a nipple on for a turn or two, just so it doesn't fall off. And once it's just preliminarily assembled, come back with your little bottle that they give you for your stainless steel spokes and stinky stuff. Put just a simple drop on each one, as close to a nipple as you'll go, all the way around. And then you want to use a Yankee screwdriver, electric screwdriver, or whatever you want to use, or a hand crank, or do it with your fingers. Turn them all in until there's about 3 threads showing. And then
you start on one
see if
side.
the hub is really loose in the wheel. If it is, it needs more. Then turn it in until there's only 1 thread showing. Shake it again. Still loose, disappear the threads. Still very loose, give each one full turn. And pretty soon, as you're bringing everything in together, pretty soon you're going to want to stop turning, and you shake the rim and nothing moves, you're getting real close. Put that in your cruise stand and you spin it good. Damn, that's pretty straight.
You don't have to go the side.
Turn. Try to do it uniformly. Don't tighten one all the way down and go to spoke number 2. You'll never get there.
Okay. And that's the next part of my journey, is now building wheels. So I've just got the spokes. I'm only halfway there at this point. But of course, now I have to restore these wheels. So that's a whole other story.
I always tell people that to do this properly, you really need an accountant's mentality. You need to be able to do a very routine job time after time after time without getting bored. If it does start getting to you, stop, walk away from it.
And if they start getting caught up in the numbers,
A little over 23,000.
if they start getting caught up in the numbers, you know you got the right guy.
Yeah. So how many turns on a 40-spoke wheel do you think it takes? This is
7,000.
Yeah, there you go. This is like that. This is like the Tootsie Pop commercial. We may never know.
Sometimes it just seems like it's going on forever. You can't get the damn thing tight or straight. And other times you'll make the first pass, and it's on the chalk parts, and you think, damn, and I'm getting paid for this.
Excellent.
Why do dirt bikes have 36 spokes?
I don't know that either.
Smaller and wider.
Just the same way.
Yeah, they're smaller and wider. They don't need it. They could make 48. They could make 60. They could make 72. Only needs 36. Some of them have 28. Some of them have 24. The little ones. Yeah. The worst I've ever done are 72s. But that was a 54-inch wheel. That was on a bicycle. Front wheel on a penny farthing.
Oh, God.
Anyway, I just, if there's any takeaway from this, don't be afraid to ask questions from the people who know the answers. That's really what this is about. And the reason why I got the right spokes is because I was nice to Thomas at Buchanan's and he was nice back. That's really why this worked out.
Actually, you were talking to Robert.
Well, that one is Robert. I don't know if Robert still works there. The second
Robert is the HMFIC.
Well, the second one that I talked to was Thomas. So the Harley spoke order was Thomas. The Indian spoke order was
A guy named Angel.
Angel's one of their top sales.
and I think I had another. Did I hand? There was an Indian spoke I had that I hung. Oh yeah, the Indian spoke. That was a really weird one. Notice how the end. Who's got that one? Yeah. So if you look at that one, the spoke bend on it. It's got a bend, and then it goes out again and makes a flat. So that would be the sort of thing that if you didn't send the sample to Buchanan's, they couldn't duplicate that.
That's for a wider flange.
Yeah, right. So it's a pretty interesting looking spoke. It's yeah, you can see it makes a really weird bend. It has the bend and then it kind of goes at another angle and then it goes flat again, right? And so it's different than these Harley ones. So if you didn't have the original spoke, it'd be tough to know. So I guess this is why you buy a junky old wheel that may not be very restorable, right? I mean, the sample is where it's all at. Yeah, no problem. And then of course, the next thing feeds into some of the other talks we've done is now these all get nickel plated, right? So what, 40, let's see, how many parts is that? That's 80, that's 160 parts to plate for both sets of wheels. Boy, that's a lot of plating, but... Oh, and we also have to take the B off of 80 spokes as well. So we're going to have some carpal tunnel after all this, I think.
How deeply was that stamped in? You're not compromising.
Well, no. So this is it's an interesting thing. It's embossed. It's not. It's raised. Yeah. It's an embossed letter, not inside. Yeah. And they do say that electro polishing these spokes can compromise their integrity. So the Buchanan's website tells you if you're going to plate these, do not electropolish. I guess electropolishing is it degrades the metal slightly. Is that?
Changes the molecular structure of the metal.
Okay, there you go. So right, if you're building something that you're trusting your life with, right? If your wheel fails, you can have a problem, right? So we don't want to suffer any issues with our spokes. So yeah, if you're gonna work with these, don't do anything that's going to make the spoke weaker. So that is a good question, right? Like, if you're going to grind something off or plate, we need to do it in a way that we're not making our wheel less strong. So, yeah, sure.